Welcome to Preparing for AI with Matt Cartwright and Jimmy Rhodes, the podcast which investigates the effect of AI on jobs, one industry at a time. We dig deep into barriers to change, the coming backlash, and ideas for solutions and actions that individuals and groups can take. We're making it our mission to help you prepare for the human and social impacts of AI. It's always darkest before the dawn, everyone. Welcome back to Preparing for AI, the Sustainability and AI subseries. So last week we looked specifically at energy use and the potential of AI to enable and to be potentially a barrier to the energy transition. Well, today our specific area of focus is going to be on a large language model enabled copilot called Climind, which is designed specifically for climate change solutions and which bridges the gap between data and effective climate change actions. But of course, we will talk about much more than that, I'm sure. Unfortunately, we've got no Jimmy with us today, so let me introduce our very special guest. And I have to say, genuinely, I'm honoured that you've agreed to come and talk with me today. Karen Wong is the CEO and founder of Climind. She is a UN Sustainability Development Goals Young Leader, a Schwarzman Scholar, a board member of UN Live, and, well, I guess I will let her introduce a bit more about herself and also about the Climind platform. So, Karen, thank you very much for joining us, and please, give our listeners a bit of an introduction to you and what you do.
Thank you so much, Matt. Then hello, everyone. My name's Karen, and I'm from China. I actually came from I would say like one of the most beautiful place in China is called Dali. I guess I rooted that kind of bridge the like where I'm working on right now. It's the climate change field. So I have a background actually not climate change, but in computer science statistics way ago when I just started my career. It was kind of coincident how I got into this, and then follow up with a rabbit hole, just going into like climate, and then what we're doing right now. So the startup Climind. Climind is a combined word. It's climate and the mind. We got a name. So it started a year and a half ago, like almost 2 years. I was still at Cambridge. So back then I was working at Imperial College, London, as a researcher in the climate green finance center. And I live in Cambridge. So it was like one day on the street, I saw a really cool company. It's called Second Mind, doing, I think it's autonomous vehicle. So we're starting the idea of Climind, like having what we can do to really accelerate the whole field of climate change. And then that's how I got the name for. It's just get back a little bit. So Climind is 99% of my energy right now, like to run this startup. We're building the large language model, the data infrastructure to facilitate, accelerate the transition. So it goes beyond like a ChatGPT. The product is the software itself. But now a lot of, for example, like financial companies, education institutions are using it for a varied purpose, from education to search and knowledge research, and then ESG report analysis, and long list going on. And then we're still exploring apparently like how Climind as a young company can actually bridge a gap. The exciting world of AI, but on the other hand is climate change, apparently a big problem. They need to accelerate the process. So this goes to also spend a lot of time in the public sector. So got really lucky to be selected as one of the 17 SDG young leaders. It's official appointment under the Youth Envoy Office. This office is originally from the Secretary General office, and then now trying to to open the door to young people to access the United Nations decision-making activities, etc. So through that, I think life has been pretty intense in the climate sector, and then cannot wait to share more today.
And I can confirm that where you're from is one of the most, if not the most beautiful parts of China. So for people who come here, then, do it sustainably, but definitely travel to Dali and around the lake and spend time there. It's a wonderful place, genuinely. So I guess maybe we start off by trying to kind of take a positive and look at the potential for AI to be a enabler of climate solutions. So, in terms of climate, I think you've said a bit about where the idea came from. But do you want to explain a bit about how the platform works? I mean, what's the advantage of a focus model like this? Why would somebody not just use a general model or tailor their own open source model? What's the advantage that Climind could offer?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think like a lot of misunderstandings of AI's impact in different sector, not necessarily being climate, is we emphasize too much on the AI rather than the problem like we're solving. So the beginning point was I started. Well, I was at Imperial College and then doing research on like carbon markets, physical risk, and then it was really obvious like how slow this industry has evolved. And then if you look into like climate finance, for example, what are the players and what kind of value, what actions that people are doing? Data is the building block for many decisions, either like insurance, product building, or simple example like how you're doing assessment for portfolio, like the stress testing. And then it was quite shocking, like how old school, like back then, if you look into more in this area, like people running around Excel, and then we call it a scenario analysis for climate risk, not even prediction. Well, I think that it's a really wise use of the vocabulary here because it's true. Like today, we know so limited about what's going on for the climate risk. So there's two types of climate risk, like transition and physical. So that was like a beginning point. I really hope like there's a tour at least can save some time for researchers of literature review or like to just in general like finding information. Large language model was not a big thing yet back then. But we'll kind of start early, like exploring the NLP solutions to apply into this like knowledge intense field. So back to the question, I think like the additionality of Climind is we're not positioning ourselves as an AI company because our user they don't care it's AI or not AI. What the user care more about is whether we can help to solve the solution, solve the problem, and um, one opinion I have is I think the access to information is productivity. And the productivity is where you can save costs and you can increase the growth. And then, especially in this area of climate that we're talking about, literally like last year at the United Nations General Assembly, we look at the numbers, it's shocking, like how far we are, like into all the goals, like SCG or like the climate goals. So that was really naive motivation. Like we hope to build something people can save the time to just work on things really matter. But down to the practical level, Climind functions as for now it's like a chat GPT, but we're creating more interface. The idea is everyone can like if you can speak a type of language, you can play around the software. And I think most of the entry level work are completely like can be done by the platform we're using right now. And we keep exploring what else we can do. And besides like a question answering, we also create different agents. So task solving agents, for example, like a recent one is how to extract a lot of information from the ESG report. And then that goes to like if you scale that, it's actually much harder than you thought it can be. So now a user can just use Climind, like click a couple buttons, and then to get all the ESG answers they hope to get, for example, from Hong Kong Stock Exchange, all the way back to like 2013 until today. So we save a lot of time for them, not just the money. And I only see this as the beginning of what's possible. And I think the final thing I want to address on is the product also doesn't matter. So we hope to be a solution provider. Like at the end of the day, especially we do like a B2B. So our user, like the consideration they have is sometimes it's more complicated for decision making, especially goes to corporate. for the decision making process. So we're still, I think, early stage of exploring product market fit, but so far we got a really good, and then serving a couple of bigger clients in the different sectors.
So agents is obviously, this year seems like, although I'm sure there'll be many other developments, but it feels like it's the year of agents. That's the next big step, and already Google obviously have, started to advance that. So is that where your focus is at the moment, in developing specific agents that will be, then of more specific use to your clients?
Um, yes and then no. I think we spend half of energy on data set and then function. So data set is what differentiate Climind compared with like ChatGPT, Perplexity, or other tools in China. And the agent parts is really, well, the way I think a large language model also change. What it changed is the format of software. We don't need that much complicated design in the future. So agent wise, we're trying to find the common ground. What are the repeatable and then like really labor intense tasks like Climate can jump in. And so far we'll find a couple. If it can be predicted, like be scalable, then we're gonna like tailor it into more user friendly and then be part of the platform in the future.
So if I think from the point of view of, we think our listeners, if we have the right target market, are not experts around the use of large language models or AI. They're people who, are interested and are trying to learn about this. I wonder, because what I would think at this point is, well, okay, that sounds really nice, but I don't really understand, practically what is the use of that? How is it useful? So I know it's obviously, there may be sensitivities around discussing your clients, but maybe you could give us a few examples of practical uses of Climind with, specific ways in which it's being used at the moment.
Yeah, I mentioned one example with just a bit more details on that. So in the rating world, like how the financial rating comes up, either it's climate related or not, you basically need a lot of data point to tell you like how's the performance of this public company or like private company. Traditionally, you find information from like financial report, like news, different source information, and then now the majority of the sources are from carbon disclosure, ESG disclosure, so environmental, social governance. And the one pain point here is those reports are not really readable. It's well designed, but it causes additional level of issues for the user, like the useful information is actually limited. So what happened is uh, previously, like you basically need to hire a lot of researcher, like entry level interns, to gather the data from a bunch of ES report and then consolidate the data point into the actual rating part to calculate the score. From us, that's not necessary. So right now, our user can just upload the report, or we upload the report for them, and then what they need to do is just to ask the question, and then we'll generate the answer for them. It's accurate. It can give you the citation of where it's coming from. So that's one really concrete example. And then this is recurring as well because you need to do that every year. And the more companies are doing disclosures, I imagine this market can just grow rapidly. And then the second example, I think research is something we're figuring out. Like we did some benchmark. So when you search a really specific climate related question on Google, on ChatGPT or Perplexity and then us, there are a couple of differences that can make climate really different from the others. Um, so that scenario like applies for more like researcher, for example, as researcher doing CSIRs or simply someone working a bank to look into climate risk. I can imagine a lot of moving piece like small questions. Traditionally, you need to like search from a bunch of materials, maybe like a lot of calls. And now we can just ask a question and then we give some difference. One is the citation part. So credibility is the number one thing for us to build a product. And then second is how comprehensive and up to date the answer can be. And then third, so we did a lot of fine tune and making sure like the answer speaks the climate language. So for example, like if you ask a physical risk, it will not give you something about sports. And then you will get a sports answer if you're doing that in ChatGPT, like without much prompt. Yeah, so that's, I think, like a really structured way of answering unstructured question. So two examples I can give right now.
So presumably then it's it's not hallucinating references, because I can imagine that would be something for you that would be a real risk to the kind of integrity and the trust in the model. So yeah, we've talked in previous episodes around the risks of hallucination, and particularly if you work in sectors like the legal sector, or you're talking about essentially accounting, you cannot afford to have a hallucination of a a reference, for example. So using your kind of data set rather than an open source model means that hopefully you've managed to ensure as much as possible that the information that's going to be given out is correct. So that's one of the selling points I would guess from your model over an open source model, or even a closed model that's got a bigger data set.
Yeah, exactly. I can absolutely imagine how people search information in the future. And fundamentally, I don't think people has a need of searching, is finding information you need. And hallucination partially can be solved by this technology we're using right now. It's called RAG. But purely using some RAG is not enough. So RAG, the full name is retrieval augmented generation. So this is a sort of way you can generate the citation, but there are like nuance there. For example, how comprehensive your source is, and then are those information really from the source? So the relevance, and also like the how updated those information can be. So that's definitely, I think, make Climind really different from other tools we have. And then this, like you're absolutely right. Like this field has been evolved so quickly. We see a lot of open source projects coming out, and I think the trend is that we see the trend that the cost can be driven down moving forward, and also the integration of AI and then vertical sector. We saw many examples in legal, for example, like people doing legal LLM solution and climate. We're potentially, I think, one of the first company actually created the product, not the research paper level, but do something like users are using right now.
And is this something that the public can use? If an individual who is interested in climate change. So I'm, again, I'm assuming that people listening here, there may be people who have a particular interest. Maybe they're studying, maybe, they don't work for an organization which is going to pay to use the platform. Is there a way for people to test it out? Is there a way for people to try it? Is there, a way they can sign up and have a go with Climind?
Yeah, we're online. It's really easy to find climind.co. But unfortunately, we haven't fully open to individuals yet. So there are a couple considerations. Like one is, we're like a professional sector, so I don't imagine we kind of like to B2C feel like
yes, it's a
people.
B2B focused model. I
Yeah,
understand that.
and then so most of the users are professionals, so we have a form, waiting list. So kind of screening the waiting list and making sure like this is actually user in the sector. We can help them. So now we got actually a couple hundred, I think almost 1,000 users backend, and then it goes across the globe, not just in China, but people speak different languages. That gives us really good feedback on the model updates. But moving forward, we are in the process of opening this to general public, and also not just climate. You can search anything. Just like for a climate question, like we're better. Yeah, so we're in the process of slowly open this to the general public, because we really want to expose us to the market and see how people react with such a tour. But regarding business model, like we do B2B as the main financial source.
So we've really focused there in the beginning on Climind, which we said we wanted to do today, because obviously that's that's your model, and that is where you have a specific background and understanding. But I wonder, just sort of more generally, before we move to the other side of it, how do you see AI in general as an enabler of climate solutions? Do you think there are other areas where you're enthusiastic and you think there is a way for AI to make a really positive change? I mean, the last podcast that we did, which Anders Hove, who is a research fellow in Oxford, he's a specialist on energy. And I think the thing from that conversation that came out to me was AI is going to continue to kind of iteratively help with a lot of the tools that are already in place. But there isn't a silver bullet that we could think of. There's not a magic solution that AI is going to come in next year and just suddenly fix. It's not going to tell us suddenly how we can harness all the energy from the sun. But maybe further down the road, there are developments that are going to make a huge difference. Is there anything particular that you're excited about, or that you are expecting to happen in the next, kind of few years?
Absolutely. And then that's actually the origin thought we're thinking to have Climind. It's not just helping people to write reports or doing like tax stuff. I think the sector I'm really hoping to get or be part of it is climate risk. So how you measure, how you understand physical or transition risk at a asset level or a level that's really useful for people who need to access it. And why this is so important. Climate disaster, like we had a actually limited history of like recording the climate disasters. So that caused a lot of challenge when we come to model like nature disaster, things like that. So there's a technology limitation, but also like this area has been evolved slowly. But now it's like I think it's experiencing the exponential growth. As you mentioned, like energy is a really exciting field because there's a lot of computation stuff you can do to either simulate, to do work like with a lot of upfront cost, but you can kind of like simulate what's going to be happening in the future if you have the new grid or like new format of energy source. So back to climate example, we hope to do something in the climate risk field. So by that I mean with the really complicated source information, how you can precisely calculate the risk. What does that mean to your company or to your supply chain or to your, like even like a policy, like a transition risk to your asset. And I also saw the big gap, like today we're still doing scenario analysis for that layer. And insurance sector, perhaps like the frontier to push forward that because you need to build new product based on understanding of climate risk. But there's so much more can be done, like either collect more alternative data or the way how you process the data. Then you're right, like the other field, we have such a matured application on AI already, like medical or like drug discovery. In climate, it's still quite new. But I think the good news is also I saw more and more tractions in the sector, but also perhaps because I'm working in this field, so I got fed by the information all over. But it's definitely a big topic right now, the hype of AI for climate science. We check out like a Microsoft AI for Good, a lot of topics under this umbrella. Same for Google. And then there are a couple of other organizations that I interviewed previously for our podcast, like Climate Change AI. Oxford is a great institution that we used to work with closely at Imperial. Yes, I think that that's something we imagine we can do, especially for multi-module. So beyond the text, we also can deal with imagery, like different like unstructured data. That can be really exciting.
I mean, again, I guess it's on the reporting side rather than on, as a kind of solution in itself to climate change. But one thing that I think would be really useful that AI could do, and I guess maybe this is something you're thinking about because it's obviously something super important, but a better way or an easier way for companies to be able to calculate their scope 3 emissions through their supply chains, because I think that for most organizations across the world, it's the most difficult thing, and it's the thing that you see more and more that at both a national level and a company level, organizations and governments and regulatory authorities are trying to get out of some of the regulations around how they report scope 3. So I don't know if that's something that is being considered, but it feels to me like that is somewhere that that AI could make a huge difference and make it much easier. And therefore, you make it easier, then you make it less attractive for greenwashing. You make it less attractive for organizations to manipulate data.
Accounting is the simple answer is yes. You can do really complicated reasoning and calculation. And then carbon accounting is actually just linear algebra. So the computation part is easy. The really hard part is how to collect, the granularity of the data. I had worked on a couple of mortgage accounting case, like for bank back to UK, and then spend much of the time actually trying to get data, for example, from buildings' electricity consumption. And then you realize like those data point is not owned by the financial institution, it's not owned by even the household. It might owned by the electricity company or somewhere else. So scope 3 is quite hard. But there's a research actually done by a researcher from Oxford. I think I kind of really agree with him. Is accounting, carbon accounting, more important than one is consistency. So how the company report consistently by one or like different standard. You cannot change every year, and then it's hard to compare. Cannot compare apple with banana.
Yeah.
And then second is like through one industry, like you're expecting company report by the same standard. So vertical and horizontal. Whether scope 3 is necessary, I think it depends on the usage of the emission number and how much effort you need to spend into that, and then how accurate the data can be, whether that makes sense, like for costing issue. I think the key thing is like people are trying to figure out a way you can access, you can evaluate whether a company has more greenhouse gas emission or not. And the future is more important than past. There's so much can be done. I think like synthetic data, the estimation might also be a way out. That's definitely a area. And then there are a couple of companies I know like doing carbon accounting software, which is already unicorns. But I think that today, if we repeat the same thing, that will be a little bit difficult. So we're not really on the accounting side right now. We do have clients asking whether we can do accounting for them using different standard. And we're still exploring that. So maybe, and we'll see. Yeah.
Shall we flip it round now then? I mean, we've tried as much as possible, I think, to be positive about how artificial intelligence can be an enabler. But how about in terms of concerns around AI is potentially a barrier to climate and sustainability goals? So I don't want to go too much into detail of these two examples because we discussed them quite a lot in the last episode. But the two that I had and that myself and Anders talked about, one was energy use from data centers. And obviously, that if we're looking at potentially an additional 20% of world energy use, then that potentially diverts from gains that we would have made in terms of moving over to green energy sources for other users of electricity and power. The second one is the diversion of capital, that money that would otherwise have gone to helping achieve climate goals. Does it then go to purchasing GPUs and chips instead? I mean, Anders told me, and this was quite useful, that in his view, nobody who's going to invest in those chips is going to invest in energy, because they're just not, they're not rivals. You're not going to find hedge funds, you're not going to find, venture capital invested into energy in the same way, because it doesn't have the same, it doesn't have the same gains. It's so kind of long term. So that in a way, I guess, is kind of quite reassuring. But on the other hand, it does mean there's only so much capital to go around. I still think if money is focused on AI because that's where all the growth is, does it divert, even if it's not necessarily money, but it diverts people's attention away from climate goals and sustainability? So is there anything that you have as particular as a concern? If it's, even better, if it's not one of those two examples, or if it is one of those two, then maybe you'd like to expand on where your concerns are.
That's actually a brilliant comment, by the way. I don't think the attention to large language model AI will dilute attentions on climate. we're living in a really busy world, and then the amount of the capital flow, if you look into it, I think last year perhaps is also the peak of climate investment in UK, like from the pitch book I saw. I want to address on that, and before I giving you, I think my concerns on this. And I'm currently finishing the actually thesis at the Schwarzman College on AI, large language model for IPCC. So it touches a little bit on climate science. It is too early, I think, to make the statement like new AI will bring more emission due to say data center. It's complex issue, and then I don't think like there's a solid paper on that yet, because I think company running the data center is also figuring out like energy source be more green to run the center.
Yeah, and they're going to be more efficient as well. I think we understand there's going to be efficiencies around the way they run, around cooling. So yeah, I appreciate it's almost impossible, isn't it, at the moment, to actually forecast the different, how much is that increase in technology going to mitigate the additional need for energy?
Yeah, I mean it's a totally different perspective. Like I might be wrong, but I guess like some people might look into it like crypto mining and the emission issue. It's positive correlated, but it's actually not the case. And like my concern, speaking of the concern, I think I saw a couple. So last year I had a chance to travel a lot. I went to like 3 times in New York, 3 times in Middle East for Europe, like for UN's conferences, all about AI and climate. And I think there's a digital divide. That's the first thing I noticed. Reaching the countries being able to access the latest technology, compared with those cannot. If you map it out, I can imagine like there's a potentially like a correlation of access to technology and then like impact on climate. So we know from the IPCC reports, like for example, like Southeast Asia, some region might be the place suffered most, but they're not a big contributor to emission. And then they happen to be, I think, another really prestigious on accessing the first hand of large language model or similar technology. So I'm really worried about that because if the dynamic of society change, like how like all society get lifted up, how the tool the future generation can access, then it's hard to align the same level of education and then next generation. So the divide will just be broader. Combining the aging issue, I think it's hard to imagine like where we are going to, like with such a really challenging world. And once you have the digital divide, it goes to like I think the polarization of society, and then like all the conflicts will be happening. So not coming on the wall, but I think like what happened in Ukraine, like Russia, and like now in Middle East, a lot of also goes to the anger like people have to like nature resource, like to the limited resource we are accessing as human. So that's one, and then second is I think the prediction of how stable the society can be. Like we're in the election year, it's gonna be chaos, and and then like that will significantly impact the climate policy, almost for more than half of the global population. So much work, like potentially, like I think will be hard to say, like especially for a large economy like US. So I was actually invited to a panel with John Curry in Oslo Energy Forum like a couple months ago in Oslo. I had a really like some great lessons to take, and also a really interesting moment that I'll share here is he made his remark saying, so he's in his 80 this year, said like I'm 80 this year, but I'm not living this area. And then by that standard, you can imagine like I'm 28 this year, so it's like more than half a century I can still work in the sector. But all the climate goals, like goes to like 2050, 2060. So I think this field has so much uncertainty. Like it's really tough to imagine. So I guess that's also why you need more computing, like data, digital tool, to give to reduce the uncertainty level and then give a more assured answer, like how we should design the policy and then what kind of technology should invest in.
I think it's a great point. I mean, it's, not only is it an election year at the moment, you sort of touched on war, but there are, 2 or 3 active hot conflicts in the world at the moment. There are proxy conflicts. There's instability. We're still in a pandemic that people want to pretend doesn't exist, but is, there are more people dying and being infected with COVID at the end of last year, beginning of this year, than any time other than the kind of big Omicron peak. We have, bird flu potentially on our doorstep. There are so many things to worry about and to think about. And it often feels to me that climate change in many ways is the big one, but it's also the one that feels furthest away. And, AI, we talk about existential threats from AI and the sort of real doomers about the existential threats from AI. Well, actually, depending on how far that is off, there's so much instability that will you even get there? Is that the one you need to worry about? And I think it's the problems that are further away, and keeping people focused on those is incredibly difficult when, even down to, a micro level, cost of living and people's own daily struggles. It's very, very difficult when people have got so much in their lives to keep people focused on climate change when, like you say, we're looking at things that, even though it's happening now in people's heads, it's about 2050, it's about 2040. It's not about imminent, when actually a lot of the things are a lot more imminent than people think. So I share your concerns about, society and how we keep people focused on it. Should we talk a little bit about regulation? So I just, I'm interested in your views on this, and in particular, I guess, on large language models. But do you feel we're moving in the right direction? Are you, do you support acceleration, or are you someone who would like a slower approach to the development of AI with, more guardrails in place?
Well, it depends on where, and then we're commenting on. The AI competition really just happening a couple of countries now, and I think there's no difference like with any other technology like chips or like synthetic biology things, because it's hard to foresee what AI will make the impact on. So it's kind of scary, like for I think like in that way to look into policy making. What I can navigate right now, I think like China, like one thing China is really good at is skill and innovation, and not just AI, but for a lot of manufacturing stuff. But US is like you have a more dynamic market, like curated the bottom up innovation. So my previous startup was invested by YC China, now named as America Plus. So from that example, you can see like the really early stage AI companies now. The US might give you more chance to grow. China is a bit hard, but the other hand, like China is easier. It's like capital concentration is higher, so government is leading a lot of the investment in that field. So I think like the public policy impact on AI will perhaps be the biggest biggest factors to change how the sector will evolve. But the second kind of uncontrollable factor, I think, is the talent. Like in the end, like all the things are based on the access to talent. It's interesting that in China, you see like the top 5 LLM companies are basically located in the nearby Tsinghua or like Peking here in Haidian. I guess the same in the US, like Western and Eastern coast. And I think like that's kind of I don't think I have a position to comment on, but from purely observation, I do hope like more incentive can be created in AI, but not just concentrating on a couple of the big players, but actually trying to create a entry channel for founders and then for smaller capital providers as well. I talked with some VCs, like for them, it's also hard to access some deals because the bar has been increased like a lot to get into a round of LLM companies, especially fundamental layer. Application layer is slightly different. I don't think it's just pure AI thing. So yeah, and also not just AI. I think a public policy is for climate as well. So when you combine the two topics together, I think there's It's quite an interesting topic.
I think it's interesting that it looks like the US in the summer is likely to, if not, well, not ban, but restrict a lot open source models. So obviously Llama 3 that just came out from Meta, which I think certainly for price is the best performing open source model. But I think very much like it looks like the EU will do, the US will, regulate what an open source model is able to do, how big an open source model can be. And maybe if China doesn't do that, then it allows China to catch up in many ways. I think we'll definitely do a future episode around AI tools in China, and particularly large language models, because I think it's something that in most of the Western media, certainly you don't see or hear about, but actually we maybe see the robotic side. I think that's the one where, you can see that China's ahead, but I think for most people, they only know of sort of Silicon Valley and maybe Mistral, but maybe don't know any of the Chinese large language models or anything about the kind of level of development and innovation that's happening. I would like to ask you just, I know it's not your area of expertise, but because in this podcast, we focus on the impact on jobs and on people. So I just wonder your views on the effects of jobs, in your area, obviously, but just in general. I mean, are you in the field that thinks that AI will just fuel a huge productivity boom and we are headed to a utopia, or are you more concerned particularly about, the short-term loss to people's jobs and how those are replaced?
Yeah, so we're not doing education, but I think I have a lot to share in this topic. My simple answer is...
And it's not a binary question, so it doesn't have to be one side or the other. I appreciate most people, it's somewhere in the middle.
My standard view is AI will create more jobs than killing more jobs. And by
Do you really believe that?
Yes. And then by a couple of evidence or thought experiment. And I mean, AI is not the first wave. We're facing the kind of structure change in job market. We used to have the industrialization, several waves. So a couple, one is I think it's Jensen Huang or who gave the comment on computer science is not a really good major compared with a fundamental science, biology stuff. I completely agree. I think AI created a job because one, it's making change basically for all the sectors that touching on internet and data. And then you will create a lot of missing gap. You need people come to solve those gaps, how you prepare the data for AI, how you can understand the data for AI, and how you build the new software. So those are new job markets opportunities. And the second is also change the way of education. Is in even how we teach, not just students, but I think for teachers, professors. And then we don't want to I think stay in the original point, making no change. All the generations that's getting better. And then third is one thing I think AI really, this wave is different from the others is the scale and the speed of the change. And this is quote on John Doerr's book. So, but I think the scale and the speed of change really encouraged everyone to look into the future ways of living. And then, so that goes to, I think, endless discussions in sectors, how that will evolve. But this also link back to the point I raised about digital divide. So for example, my grandmom, she's kind of a cool grandmom. So she used WeChat Pay, she used TikTok, Douyin to watch stuff, ordering food from Taobao. But a lot of the grandparents, they don't even have a smartphone yet. So I think as there's going to be a concern. So how we can make sure this digital world is still inclusive for people without a lot of internet or data access. That's perhaps something hard to avoid. Yeah, I don't think this is the first time human beings are facing challenge the structure society change. So we should be fine.
I like your attitude to it. I wish in some ways I was in the same place. I mean, I do think even since we started this podcast and the more, I've learned about it, particularly the sort of course I'm studying at the moment, which is an AI governance course, I have started to feel some of the kind of scare stories about, everyone's going to lose their job, 8 million jobs are going to be lost. And actually, it's not going to happen as fast as maybe some people think for various structural reasons. You talked before about having the right people. You're going to need people to put things in place, and it's not going to be immediate. And therefore, for a lot of sectors, it's going to be a slow, iterative change. It's not going to be about, huge job cuts. But where I just can't agree is, this is different from other revolutions. I cannot see a way in which there are more jobs created than lost. Now, I think you can mitigate that. And I think there will be ways in 20 years' time that the structures will change. We've talked before about things like basic incomes or, alternative social models, economic models. Things will obviously have to change. But I don't see a way in which there are more jobs created than lost. I think it will have to be more radical than just about replacing jobs. But we will see, because none of us really know. And I hope that you're right, and I hope that I'm wrong. So thanks for being positive, because it's good to have positive voices on the podcast, definitely. I wonder if you could just talk just for a few minutes about your personal experience of using AI tools, and then, anything that you particularly find useful that you would want to recommend. So, I feel that often the focus, is on, image generation tools and music generation and kind of really creative gimmicks, which are fun to use, but they kind of take away really from the real potential benefits and the potential harms of AI. But, are there any things that you use? Do you have a recommendation for a large language model or an agent, or anything that you would recommend people try?
I actually, well, besides Climind, of course, one of the things recently I use most is actually, well, I tried a couple, but I don't think I have one particularly I'm attached with, because I don't think like the products right now are perfect yet. I can name a few. So there's the one called Monica. I like the product design. It's like a really little pump up like on your browser, like can help you to answer questions from the page you add. It's really light regarding the format of the product, but it's not a really. It's for like a quick searching. It's not for really deep analyze. Also, like Perplexity. Perplexity is quite fast. I think it's a great product. They build the product, then they continue to build the model. So kind of benchmark them, like for some answer Climind is generating, besides ChatGPT. And then there are a couple of Chinese companies' products are really good too. I'm actually hosting an event later today with Zhipu. So Zhipu is a Tsinghua-born company doing LM. They have similar like ChatGPT, but performs better in Chinese. And those are like a text-based. Well, other module, because I don't really do a lot of design. I am early adopter kind of, but I think like for video generating or like imagery generating, well, I still feel like there's a missing part of those, including Midjourney. It's beautiful. It's magical. Save a lot of costs, I guess, like time as well. But it's too perfect. And that makes sense. Like everything's right, which is not right. Also depending on how you use it for. But at least we do have a couple of image photo we have in our article. Some are generated by AI. But you can easy to tell like those are generated by the same AI because it's too perfect and then like it's consistent. But I'm really looking for actually the domain specific usage in field like EV, like energy you mentioned. Like you don't have to fail the AI, but it actually help you to change the industry. I think that's a key thing here. How we can really make a meaningful usage of AI.
I completely agree with your point there. I think for sort of image generation and music generation tools, it sort of reminds me of a few years ago they came out with there were apps where you could take a picture of yourself and show what you're going to look like, in 50 years time or as a baby, which I guess were kind of actual early AI image tools. And they also, if you think about things like Suno, where you obviously generate music, I mean, I think we generate some good tracks for the end of the podcast, but they all have a style that sounds like a Suno generated track. And all those images, like you say, the image that we used for this podcast, they look like they're generated by an image creation tool, and they have a style but they don't, at the moment anyway, they don't for me replace, other works of art or music. But I guess we don't know at what point does it become undistinguishable, and at what point does it kind of make that leap? Because I think we've always got to be cautious of the fact that what we're seeing now is, the very beginning. You look at apps like the AI pin, which has been absolutely slated, and it looks terrible, but you can see that, okay, that's the first iteration. What that's going to look like in 2-3 iterations time is completely different. So I hope actually in a way that they never become perfect, and that allows, humans to keep the creative side. I think I like looking at my daughter's hand-drawn pictures more because of AI images rather than less, which, maybe there'll be an effect, or maybe it would just be sort of my generation and above, and younger people won't care about it. Remain hopeful anyway. How about other sort of recommendations? So apart from AI tools, I mean, on the kind of sustainability side, or, you've obviously talked about Climind. I know you have a podcast as well, which I have been listening to. I mean, do you have anything else as a sort of final recommendation that you'd like to give to people listening?
Yeah, I think I have a couple of Chinese to recommend that. But I want to mention the English ones here, given the audience. I am a big fan of the I forgot his name, the MIT researcher. Like, he has a podcast, like a really long one. Let me just find the name. But I'm like really addicted to podcast.
Lex Friedman.
Lex Friedman. And then there are a couple of episodes I highly recommend.
I also recommend Lex Friedman, but you need to give it. It's like reading a Sunday newspaper for people in the UK. It's like you need to give 2.5 hours of your time to focus in on it. But they're fascinating because he goes into like a level of depth that nobody else does.
It is. It's really long, and there's a reason why.
And he sounds like Batman as well. I think he sounds like Batman, which I find kind of weird and cool at the same time.
Even the picture.
I wish I had his voice anyway for doing podcasts. I'd be far more successful if I sounded like Lex Friedman, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you will. There are a couple of sustainability one, and then one is called. So Bloomberg has a couple. There's a Switched On, and then I also listen to a lot of David Robinson show, shorter, more about investment. Talks on Google. There are.
I mean, you haven't even mentioned your own podcast yet, so maybe promote your own one.
So we have talks at Climind, but that was like purely by accident, because I was just one day came to me like, why don't we make a recording of the fascinating chat we have with all the researchers. So everything about climate and data. The first couple of sessions is a little bit challenging because it's too technical. We even had a speaker. Our first speaker was a researcher from Breakthrough Energy, so the organization created by Bill Gates. And he went too technical, had a PowerPoint telling the grid, and then we'll figure out it's not a really good way for people to listen on the radio. So it went easier, but we'll keep working on that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Karen, thank you so much for giving us your time. I know you're incredibly busy with all the many, many things you do, but thank you for joining us. It's really interesting and positive. And like I said, it's really nice to have someone on who is, well, not just positive, but is actually doing something positive and trying to make a change. I think, the things that you do are genuinely inspirational. And I imagine that the kind of listener that we will have today will probably feel the same and hopefully be inspired to go out and sign up for a trial for Climind and shout about it. And thank you. So that's it. That's a wrap for today. We will be back next week, myself and Jimmy, with a normal episode of the podcast. And as always, we will leave you with our Suno and Matt and Jimmy generated outro track. So thank you all for listening. Have a great week and see you next week. I'm missing the beast on my fingertips, a language copilot ready to rip. Searching for solutions, one line at a time. Harnessing the power to save our planet's prime. Digging deep into the data, the facts. Unleashing words that'll leave you slacked. I've got the knowledge, the answers are told. With this tool in my hands, we'll break through the mold. No ignorance, it's time to unite. Let's face the climate crisis. Turn on the light.